Hey, what is going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and in this video here, we're back over at the PlayStation 4 for a different kind of jailbreak. Now, I know this one might be a little bit odd in number because this is working up to firmware 11.02. However, the last one I covered was actually on firmware 13.00, so what makes this one different? Well, this one here is going to be using WebKitty, which is a little play on WebKit, meaning we'll be able to use the browser, and that's really about it. We are also going to need a USB drive, and I'll get into that, but this here WebKitty states is a collection of WebKit-based exploit chains for the PS4 console, and it was formerly known as PS3 Enhanced from Arab Pixel for anybody who might be familiar with it here. Now, this here is quite nice because it does have a really nice range of firmwares available working on this. So if you have firmware 6.70 all the way up to 11.02, this should work for you. Additionally, this doesn't require anything like pp-pwn, so nothing over your network that you have to inject into the system itself. This doesn't require anything like PlayStation View or using View After Free, and it doesn't require burning a disk such as using BDJB. For this one, really all you have to do is make sure you can access the internet browser and internet on your console, and that's about it. It's going to be that easy to set up on here. Now, before we get to the fun stuff here, I do need to cover some of the disclaimers for things that people frequently ask. First of all, this does work on every model of the PlayStation 4, including the original PS4, the Slim, and the PS4 Pro, as long as you have access to an internet connection and the system is on an applicable firmware. Secondly, this does not allow you to get onto PlayStation Network. One thing you have to realize with these jailbreaks is that they are released for outdated firmwares on purpose. You'll be able to access the internet, but if you're thinking of getting onto PlayStation Network and using your system like a normal system, you will not be able to do that since that requires the latest firmware. So do keep in mind that is on you. You need to either choose whether you want to have the latest firmware with PSN access but no jailbreak, or if you want to be on an outdated firmware with a jailbreak but no PSN. If you're in that latter category, the rest of this video will be for you. Additionally, some people might be wondering if they have a higher firmware system than 11.02, if there's a way they could downgrade the firmware. And the thing I say here is kind of, but typically if you're going to be asking this, and I mean no offense by it, this will probably be above what you're trying to do here. There is an option to revert the firmware on your system, but you could see just from the table of contents here, there's a lot that you have to do, and this is not an easy task. This does require opening up the system, getting some specific programmers and hardware such as this, and doing some incredibly fine level soldering. This is certainly not for the faint of heart right here, and if you just want something where you can turn on your system, run a few commands, and downgrade it, unfortunately that is not possible on the PlayStation 4. So that's all to say here. If you're on too high of a firmware, one thing to keep in mind is that with the PlayStation 4 scene, patience is a virtue and patience does get rewarded. So what I'd recommend doing if you have a system on a firmware that is too high and you want to try this, the best thing you can do right now is really just go into your settings, take that system offline, so disconnect it from the internet, unplug it, do what you need to, keep it in a corner somewhere, and that way you'll be able to be on an outdated firmware, and eventually there will be a jailbreak that will come out. I don't know when, I don't know how long you'll need to wait on this here, but if you just wait and you're patient enough, you will get rewarded with a future jailbreak. That's typically how it happens in the PS4 scene. Now for our prerequisites, first of all, you're of course going to need your PS4 up and running and working. And like I said earlier, this can work on any model of the PS4, including the original Fat, the Slim, and even the Pro. The biggest thing is we are first going to need internet access on here, and we're also going to need it to be on the applicable firmware. In order to check that, you can come up here to your settings. We're going to scroll down to System, go into System Information, and right here it should show your system software version. Now keep in mind, at the time I'm recording this, and the links will be down below in the description if you want to verify this yourself, but there are specific firmware versions this does require. Here you can go over to Supported by this repository, and we need both a userland and a kernel exploit chained together for this. Now the lowest firmware this works on is firmware 6.70, and the highest firmware is 11.02. So since I'm currently using firmware 9.00, that puts me in a pretty good spot in the middle. Aside from that, the next thing we're actually going to need here is going to be a USB drive. That's going to be to copy some files to and from it using another device. So you'll need something such as a computer or a tablet or whatever you can use to get files downloaded and transferred over. And that's about it. There's not all too much else you need. Thankfully, this is a pretty minimal setup with how streamlined it is. So as long as you have all of that in tow, you should be all good to go. Now with that, we can actually move away from the PlayStation 4, and for this, I'm going to be using my computer in order to get all the downloads and the USB drive set up. Now I've shown this a couple times already, but the first thing here that I'd recommend pulling up is Arab Pixel's WebKitty GitHub repository. It's going to be, of course, linked in the description here, and I'd recommend giving the features, the additional features here, a good read, just so you can understand really how this works. There's even some screenshots right here that show how this is set up, how you can customize it, you know, the firmware supported, and so much more. And it also comes in many different languages, so this is a really great host overall. But thankfully, we don't need to download anything from this here, because over here in the corner, it's going to show the actual website that you can access on your PlayStation 4. Just keep this in mind, we're going to be using it later, and in case this website here ever changes, you can always refer back to the GitHub repository. The next download I'll recommend here is nanoDNS, and this here is going to make our network much safer, so our PS4 does not connect to any of these here. You can see any of these PlayStation or Sony related services, but that way we also do not have to rely on a public DNS server like we had to in the past, because we can just have it on our own system. It might sound complicated, but trust me, I'll show you how to set it up. It's easy. You're not even going to be thinking about it once it's done. For this, you can come over to Drakmore's nanoDNS GitHub repository, click on the releases section, and then download the latest build of nanoDNS PS4. It's going to be an ELF file like this. Just save it somewhere you can easily find it. The next thing will be the PS4 store from Lightning Mods, because this is going to make downloading and getting applications and keeping them up to date so much easier. The only thing is you're just going to need internet access on your PlayStation 4, but with the way we set up everything, it should be easy enough to do. You can come over to the releases section right here, scroll down to the latest release, and then download store.r2.pkg. Now this is something like what it should look like. You should at minimum have these two, nanoDNS as well as the store.r2 package file. Now this is also a folder here, which is Untitled Goose Game, which is a game that I had purchased and backed up and was able to make a fake package out of on my PlayStation 4. I'm not going to show how to do it in this video here, but I have a full video breaking down how you can go through the process of backing up your own games and content and such on the PlayStation 4. So this is just going to be copied over as a demonstration later for the video over how to install content. However, with that done, what we'll need to do is first hook up our USB drive. You can see mine is this USB disk right here, letter G. Yours might be different, I'm sure, but for this here, we need to make sure that this is set to exFAT. You can check the properties by right-clicking and checking the available properties, and you can see my file system is already exFAT. If it's something else, it's best to just format it here, especially because you're going to be working with large files. So for this, we can close out of here. Make sure you've backed up any data that you care about if you need to format this, and once it's backed up, we can right-click, format, select exFAT for our file system, the default allocation size is fine, quick format is fine, start, OK, and there we go, it's been formatted. Now, in order to transfer everything over, this is thankfully pretty simple. Go ahead, open up your USB drive, and the first thing we need to do is right-click and create a new folder, and we're going to call it Payloads. And once that's been created, navigate into the payload folder and copy and paste nanoDNS. There we go. And in the root of the USB drive here, all of our package files are going to go here. So that means the store R2 is going to go here, and if you have any games that you want to copy over, this is a game and an update file for it. You can just copy and paste them right there and give it a few moments to transfer over. And once it's all been transferred, that is literally about it. We didn't have to set up anything else, because the nice thing about WebKitty is it actually provides the payload that we need for our jailbreak. And once everything's been transferred over, we can now exit out of here, right click, eject our drive, and take it over to the PS4 for later. Now once we're back over at the PS4, we do need to make sure that we're connected online, and then we're going to need to open up our web browser. Now, if you've never opened up the internet browser, if you haven't really messed with it, I'm just going to say yes here. You can see that I am able to connect online. It is a slow and limited browser, mind you, so you're going to run into some restrictions here. But what we can do is hit the options button. Now navigate up to settings, and what we're going to do is make sure allow cookies is enabled, make sure enable JavaScript is enabled, clear out the cookies, clear out our website data, and also prevent cross-site tracking. We can keep that enabled as well. Now we can go ahead and close out of this, and we're also going to press options again. We're going to close out of this window here, And I already see which website we're going to be using because I have used this before, but we need to now access WebKitty. In order to do this, navigate up to enter URL, enter this, and we're going to enter the website for WebKitty. Now keep in mind, in case this ever gets updated or changed, I would recommend referencing AeroPixel's WebKitty GitHub repository here, because here in the About section, you're going to have the actual live link to the WebKitty website. Now once that's all been loaded in, we can go down to Go. And I did have to refresh this here just to get it going, but once you actually get to this page, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to cache the actual website here, which is great because that means we're going to be able to use this offline. Now from here, we want to make sure, I would recommend having GoldHEN as your standard version. If you want to check for other versions here, you can, but I'm going to be sticking with GoldHEN for this. For the exploit chain, I'd also recommend just picking the default that it picks for you. However, just for the sake of this demonstration here, I am going to be going with CSS font face since that is the newer one. Now keep in mind, depending on your system might work better with one versus the other. I noticed, for example, on my system, since I'm on a low enough firmware, PS4 Lapse is great. However, I was having issues with CSS font face net control, but CSS font face Lapse ended up working a little better for me. So depending on your system and your firmware, you might want to just play around with your options. For this demonstration, I will be picking CSS font face Lapse. I'm also going to show advanced payloads, and I'm also going to enable auto retry jailbreak. And once that's done, we can now click on close. So congratulations, that's all good at this point. I'd also recommend pressing the options button here and go down to add bookmark. You can hit OK. So now in case you ever need to access this easily here, you can go over to bookmarks and WebKitty is available right there. So there we go. This has all been set up and completed. Now what we can do is I'm actually going to press options, close out of here. I'm going to close out of all of this completely, and we should be in a better spot now. Now with our jailbreak setup, let's go ahead and run through the jailbreak process from scratch. This is what you're going to need to do every time you turn on your system. That means if you've lost power, if you turn it off completely, or if you rebooted it, you will lose your jailbreak since it is tethered. So every time you do a fresh boot up of your system, you will have to go through this process. Open up the internet browser, and usually it just takes us to the last website we were on. Actually, I'll say this, okay. Well, we can't do that. I'm going to go to options, bookmarks, and see, we're already making use of this. So there we go. Go over to WebKitty, and once you have your variant picked here, I would recommend selecting GoldHEN. Just hit this PlayStation button to start. And once it starts, you're going to want to put down your controller and just wait. And there we go. Actually, first try, we were able to get that. So as you can see, it shows that GoldHEN had successfully loaded. And once it's been loaded, we can now press the back button. And we can hit back again just to exit out of the browser. If you get a message like this saying the page is not responding, do you want to stop processing? Just go ahead and hit OK on your controller. And if you get a message like this saying there's not enough free system memory, yet again, hit OK. It's going to reload this here, it's going to auto retry the jailbreak, and just let it do its thing. By the way, if it's still going to be giving you issues here, you might even have to refresh the page on here, close out the internet browser, reopen it, and even restart your system. Additionally, if it gets to a point where your system just cuts to black, it turns off, I know that's scary, but that is a kernel panic, meaning that it failed to try to jailbreak the system. In order to fix that, just turn the system on again, let it go through the process of rebuilding the database, and then restart and try again from here. But once you have your jailbreak successful, you'll be able to tell because from the XMB, you can navigate up here, go over to the left and check it out. We have GoldHEN instead of PlayStation Network, which is exactly where we need to be. Now for this here, let's go ahead and tear into the GoldHEN settings. First, we can go into our debug settings, and for the package installer, yeah, this is going to be the default here. That should be fine. For enable debug settings, I'd recommend using the full menu here, and you can even enable game debug settings if you'd like to, which I personally prefer to do. I'm now going to exit out of here, go over to cheat settings. I would recommend keeping the cheat menu enabled. You can even show the title ID here on your applications. So for example, this one only shows the title ID, this one of course shows the application version, and this one shows both of them. Keep in mind, if you have a ton of content, it might slow down performance on your menu here, but it's really useful, especially if you're going to be messing around with cheats, mods, and things like that, just to make sure you're on the proper supported version. You can also go to update the cheat archive, just tap X here, and you can see it's going to update cheats. So in the background, it's going to download and extract all the latest cheats here. And yep, that's already done. So we can now exit out of this, go down to your plugin settings, and for this, we're going to enable the plugins loader. Now we can also update the patch archive, so that's going to be the same thing. And once that's done, we're going to update the plugin archive. There we go. And there we go, everything has been updated successfully. So I'd recommend coming back up here and we're going to enable Game Patch plugin. That's pretty self-explanatory, but that will enable us to actually patch our games. Now we can go back out here, go to the game overlay settings, and if you want to enable a FPS counter, I'm going to do that. I personally like doing that here, show FPS counter as well, and you can enable system info as well too for all of this lovely information, which you can pick and choose what you want to have there. I'm personally going to disable that because I mostly just like the FPS there. You can change the text position, text color, and even enable scan lines if you want to. Now we can go back over in the servers setting. I'd recommend setting up the FTP server, so that way if you ever need to FTP files to and from the PS4 over your network, you're prepared to do that. I'd also recommend enabling the payloader server, so you can send additional payloads once GoldHEN is up and running. Now there's also a kernel log server, and I'll say this, unless you're working on development and debugging stuff, you're not going to need this, so I'm going to keep that disabled. Now we can navigate over to utilities, we have the payloader right here, and don't worry, we are going to be coming back to this, so that's not going to be left alone. Now navigate down to your settings here. I would recommend keeping rest mode support enabled. For the PPOE patch, that is if you are using it pppwn, which we are not using here. Enable BD app autokill, that's for if you're using BDJB, which yet again we are not using for this. And for the date and time settings, you can even have it update the date and time, and even enable auto update of the date and time, which I'm going to set the both of these right there. And for our last thing here, we can go into the about section, in which you have a lot more information here. So you do have the about features for GoldHEN, which shows all the stuff that GoldHEN is capable of doing. You have some information about the cheat menu right here. You also have information about the plugins. There's also some about me section here, so you can learn a little more about Sistro. Just keep in mind, it's going to take us to his GitHub, but it'd be much better to browse this on, well, not a PS4, I'll say that. So we can exit out of there. We're not done just yet. You can also check the GoldHEN supporters, so if you have ever donated or if you want to donate, your name can show up on there. You can also support GoldHEN directly, which I would recommend doing if you do enjoy GoldHEN and you get something good out of it. Just keep in mind here, just like everything else, this is through the PS4's browser, which is not great. So I would recommend accessing this website on anything that's not a PS4. The last thing we can do here is also check out the old school Cracktro, which this is always a fun thing to tease on here, and I'm not going to walk through the entire thing because I don't want to spoil it for you all, but it is a pretty cool thing to see on your PS4 in the browser. We can now exit out of here, and that's pretty much all the GoldHEN settings available that you can tweak. Now that we also have that done, you could also see here that I do have some applications and games and such already installed on here, and these are some of my fake package files I have installed, but you can see how it does look different because we get the application version as well as the title ID showing up on them. Now let's go ahead and get some package files installed. In order to do this, go ahead and take your USB drive if you haven't already done so and plug it into your PS4. There's going to be a few things you'll need online, but what we can do at least now is go to Settings. We're going to scroll down to Debug Settings, go to Game, go to Package Installer, and you can see this is our Homebrew store, this is our actual base game, Untitled Goose Game, and that's the update. Typically you want to install the game first and then the update second, but for all this here, I'm just going to hit Install All and wait. And there we go. Once everything has been installed, congratulations, we can exit out of here, and you can see you might have your first piece of Homebrew, but I also have a game with an update right here. So there we go. At this point, you can now go ahead and fire up Homebrew Store. Now, once you open up Homebrew Store, it will tell you an update is required, so just follow the instructions to update. And of course, if you support Homebrew Store and you like it, you do have some donation options available right here. But let's continue on. And there we go. Once we got it all connected and sorted out, congratulations, it looks a little bit something like this. Now what we can do is, if you want to, you can browse through the different applications that are on here, but there's a few starter applications I would recommend. I'm going to go into Store Apps, and one of them I'll recommend is Items Flow. This is just an alternative game launcher on here, which is pretty powerful and has a lot of different features, but also if you're going to be backing up your games and such on here, then this will be really helpful to have. The next thing is also going to be PS4 Explorer 2.0, which I cannot recommend enough, especially because we're going to need it for an upcoming step right here. So go ahead and get that installed. If there's anything else you want to install here, I also like Apollo Save Tool, so we can download that. There's also some other utilities here, such as the PS4 Cheats Manager, which might be a little bit redundant, but I'll go ahead and get that installed here. And the last thing I'm seeing at least is going to be Remote Package Installer. This is going to be if you want to use another device such as your phone or a laptop, computer, whatever you want to do to send packages over to the PlayStation 4 over your network to install. So you have a few options there. Now those are again just the ones that I've quickly installed here. If there's any others you want to install, feel free to. Otherwise, I'm going to exit out of the Homebrew store completely. And once that's been done, check this out. We now have all of our lovely Homebrew right here. Now there's going to be one thing that is really important that we need to set up, and that's going to be that payload I had you download. In order to set this up here for our safety, go ahead and fire up PS4 Explorer 2.0 and make sure you still have your USB drive still connected. Now navigate over to root access. We're going to enable that. And what we need to do is navigate down here to MNT, enter this, find your USB drive. So it depends on which one you have. Mine was USB 0, so I lucked out with that one, but if it's not that one, you might just have to scroll through your other USB options here until you find the one with your files on it. I know now, however, that that was USB 0. So you're going to find this payloads directory. Go ahead, hit the triangle button on it, and hit either copy or cut. I'm going to copy it out. Now go back yet again. We're going to go up to data, and within this data folder, we're going to hit triangle, and then paste our payloads folder right here. And the only payload in here is going to be nanoDNS, and that's exactly what we need. So let's go ahead, exit out. We can close out of PS4 Explorer, and at this point, you should definitely disconnect the USB drive because we're at least done using it for the rest of this video, unless there's extra stuff that you yourself want to put on. Now, in order to make use of that payload, you're going to need to navigate up here, go over to GoldHEN, go down to Utilities, and this payloader that we skipped earlier, we're coming back to. Now you can see that there's a few paths that we can put it in, and that's why I had you all put it in that data and payloads folder. For this here, we can navigate over to Launchpad, and check this out, we have nanoDNS available. Now go ahead, hit the square button right here, and we're going to add that to our auto run queue. Now once that's been added, we can exit out of here, exit out all the way, and we need to change one of our network settings. For this, go over to Settings, go to Network, make sure you're connected to the internet, and go to Setup Internet Connection. Pick your option you're going to use. I'm still going to use a LAN cable, and this time around we're going to use Custom. Navigate to Custom. Now for your IP address settings, you can keep it automatic unless you want to set manual ones yourself. Do not specify for DHCP hostname. And then for the DNS settings, we're going to change this to manual. And for our primary DNS, we're going to change it to the following. We're going to change it to 127.0.0.1. That's going to put us on the local host here, and that's going to mean that once we turn on our PS4 and it's stock, it's not going to be able to connect to any other services or servers. But the way we're setting this up is once we jailbreak the system, we're going to have our own DNS server running on the system, which will still block Sony and PlayStation traffic, but it will give us internet access. So once this is all set up, I'll show you exactly what I mean. Navigate down to Next. Automatic for MTU is fine. Do not use proxy server, and test your internet connection. It should give you an IP address, but it's going to fail at the internet connection, and that is completely expected. We can go ahead, exit out of here, exit out yet again, exit out here. You can see my notifications are going a little bit crazy, but now to show you all how this should work with that payload, let's go ahead and just start from the beginning. and restart the system. So now that we're restarting the system, this is why it is so great. Typically before, what you had to do is use a public DNS or your own DNS server to connect to in order to keep your system safe and keep it blocked from PlayStation and Sony traffic. However, that introduced a few issues, including some ISPs and routers not respecting that custom DNS, some just straight up blocking it, but even worse, if that custom DNS server goes down, there's not all too much you can do. So this is how this should all work from the beginning. You can see right here, my system is not in a jailbroken state. If I try to boot up anything here, I can't use it. So when you jailbreak the system, just go over to the internet browser. And you are going to get an error here with the actual PlayStation site. That's going to be okay, and that's expected because, as it says here, it couldn't resolve the host name. Now what we can do is go to Options, Bookmarks, and we're going to load up WebKitty. And since it has cache locally, guess what? We can run this completely offline. Now hit the button here and let it do its magic. And there we go, GoldHEN was able to load successfully. And Payloader is listening. Let's see what else we get. FTP is listening. And you can see this is connected back to my network now, and there we go, nanoDNS is running successfully. And finally, the date and time has been updated. So once that's all done, we can go ahead and close out of the internet browser. Now check this out, we are back in a jailbroken state. You can see everything here, you have GoldHEN available, and the nice thing is we can now access the internet. So for example, if I open up the Homebrew store, still have this same thing here, it's going to load up the app icons, but you can see here that I am still able to connect to it. So even if I go to the store apps and load up any more, yep, I still have new ones that are loading in. So that really gives us the best of both worlds, because even if nanoDNS is a little bit confusing, you only have to set it up one time, and once it's set up, you forget about it. It really doesn't feel like you even have it here. So once that's all good, we can now close out of here, and congratulations, your network settings are dialed in and your PS4 is in a safer spot. Now, if you remember all those cheats and patches I had you downloaded, I'm going to show you all how to utilize them. For this, I'm going to be using one of my favorite games, PT, and this is specifically going to be for patches. In order to load a patch on a game, you'll need to highlight the game, press the options button here, and it should bring up the GoldHEN patch menu, which you can enter. Now, not all games and not all versions of games have patches available, but what we can do is enable a few things such as 60 FPS, disable lens flare, disable camera blur, disable screen space reflections, and disable film grain. So I just enabled everything here. And once you have that set up, enter PT or whichever game you're running, and it should look something like this. There we go, 5 patches applied, 5 patch lines applied, and if you look in the bottom left corner of the screen, you'll also see the frames per second counter. Now, if you have never played this game, first of all, I cannot recommend it enough, and secondly, you'll know that the game typically runs at 30 frames per second and has film grain and all the other stuff that we disabled. So this is running on an original fat PlayStation 4, but I've noticed when you're in the original room right here, this is running at 60 frames, but if we enter here, and this is a fault of the game itself, probably just the engine and such, you can see it drops down to 30. However, if I kind of look down, it ends up running at 60 again. But this is just a really quick demonstration because this game typically does not run at 60 frames per second, but thankfully we are able to get a little bit of that power here. Now, before I end up scaring anyone, I am going to close out of this, but that's how you can utilize the patch menu here. I'm going to close out of that, and we should be good. Now for our actual cheats, that's going to be a little different. For this, I'm going to load up another game here, which is going to be Bloodborne, since that's a pretty famous one. We can find Bloodborne, load this up here, and if you want to use actual cheats, in order to do that, you first need to boot up the game itself. And this is also why I like the FPS counter, because once it shows up and once it's moving, you typically know the game is running here. Now, once you have that all done, what you can do is you can either access it from the XMB, or you can hold down the share button for a few seconds, and the cheat menu is going to come up right here. Now, there's several different cheat options which could be available. You could see this version and this build of Bloodborne has 5 different options available. So we got that one, we got another one, we got a third one, a fourth one, and a fifth one. So you'll just have to pick and see which one works for you and which one you prefer. Typically, if there's a master code, you're going to want to enable that. And if you want to enable everything else, like infinite items, one hit, infinite, well, literally everything, you can do that here. And once everything is enabled, we can exit out. And for this, I'm going to play offline. Now keep in mind as well too, you can also use cheats and patches at the same time. So for this, I know I just booted it up, but I'll actually show you that as well. I'm going to close out of this, not use that. I'm going to close out of the game. And the thing is, you can run cheats at any time while the game is running. You can enable or disable them. But with patches, you must load them before you boot up the game. So you need to highlight the game, go to the patch menu here, and from here you have a few options such as disable chromatic abrasion, motion blur, 60 FPS. I'm going to do the resolution patch right here, disable VSync. This one's actually pretty cool. This is going to be more obvious, so I'll go ahead and enable those. And just like before, we can navigate into Bloodborne. Now you're going to see if you have patches on here, they are going to automatically load in. There we go. We got all of our patches and our patch lines applied. Then for the actual cheats themselves, you will have to re-enable them. So I'm just going to do that. And again, it should be pretty obvious once we get in game. Now it is cool seeing the menu run at nearly 600 frames per second, but we do need to get to playing. You can see in the bottom right, this has been patched, and we can continue with my game that I had. So there we go. You can see I have 9s for everything, but even if I give this a try here, oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yep. I have the debug camera enabled. Alright, so that's obvious enough that we have both cheats and patches running on here. So congratulations, that's showing how you can have a bit more fun with your games. Pretty cool overall. But yeah, we can go ahead and close out of here, since that's all I really had to show you in terms of cheats and patches. Now I'm going to run a scenario by you all right here. Let's say you've been using your jailbroken PS4, you've been having fun with your new applications, games, all that fun stuff, and then you go to turn off the system. And now let's say it's 2 days later, I want to play my games here, have some fun on my freshly jailbroken PlayStation 4, but I'm going to run into an issue here pretty soon. First of all, the menu system is going to look a little bit different. I don't have GoldHEN available, I don't have all that extra information showing up, and even worse, you'll see all these padlocks on your content. So you all saw all these things worked, but now Homebrew Store, broken. PT, broken. Bloodborne, broken. Well, that is the nature of the jailbreak. You see, this is a tethered jailbreak, and as I said earlier in this video, if you ever do a full restart on your system, meaning you turn it off, or you restart it, or even if you just cut power to your system, you do have to jailbreak it again. Now you don't need your USB drive still plugged in, but in order to do that, like I showed a little earlier, you'll need to go to the internet browser, wait for this to load in, and then hit this button right here and wait. Now, as you can see, we were able to jailbreak the system yet again. We have all of our lovely notifications popping up, so I'm going to close out of the browser here, and you can see yet again, it looks a little bit like what we had before. It has these same applications here, we see all the same information, we're getting all the pop-ups, but check this out, I can load up Bloodborne. Yep, it boots up just fine. We'll be able to see that with the FPS counter. So there we go, we have our patches applied as well. If I close out of here, I could do the exact same thing with PT. So close out of Bloodborne, go back to PT, it should do the same thing. And of course, if I do the same thing with any other application on here, including the Homebrew store that was not working, well, it's going to do that here. Again, there's no issue with it, and you'll even see that with my content here, I don't have any padlocks on it. You just need to keep in mind that every time you do a full reboot of the system, when you're coming from cold boot, the system is not in rest mode. That is what I'm saying. Whenever you do that, you are going to have to do a full re-jailbreak on your system. You don't have to go through the entire process of setup again, but you do have to go through that website and reload the jailbreak manually. So now with all of that done, some people might be worried about that because, well, they might not want to do that every single time. And one thing that does help out here is rest mode. Now keep in mind, for a while, rest mode was really finicky on the PlayStation 4, and it could still depend on your system. So while it's not a guaranteed bulletproof solution, it does help out a bit here if it does work. In order to utilize that, you can bring up the side menu here by holding down the PlayStation button on your controller, go to power, and enter rest mode. Alright, so now that my PS4's orange light is stable, I'm going to turn the system back on. You all probably heard that beep, and let's just see what happens here. And there we go, it booted up a lot quicker, of course, because it was coming out of rest mode, and you all actually probably saw that transition too, once it went from, stock to not stock. I didn't have to open up the web browser here, I didn't have to do anything else. We have all of our lovely pop-ups, we have all of our content here, and if I try to open up anything else, well, let's go ahead and try PT again. You can see that I'm going to still get my patches, still get my FPS, and the game still loads in. So that's also another good option for many people that people do prefer. As opposed to turning on the system from scratch every single time in jailbreaking, you can kind of get past that in a way by using rest mode. So congratulations, if rest mode works for you, awesome, and if it doesn't, you're probably just going to have to go through the process of going through the browser each time. Now for the last thing here, one thing that people do ask about is firmware update blocking, especially because I really stress that you do not want to update the firmware on your system. Well, the first thing is that if you're running GoldHEN, GoldHEN actually has firmware blocking capabilities while it is running. That means while this is running, you will not be able to apply firmware updates on here, or really download them. And even if they download, you won't be able to be successful with it. But some people might want some extra restrictions and some blocks on here. And that's, well, what we were doing throughout the whole tutorial. You might remember if you go into settings and go to system, you do need your automatic downloads disabled. I originally had this system on firmware 1.76, and the entire time I've had this system, I've accidentally updated it exactly 0 times, just by following the instructions that I've been giving you all here. So as long as you have these disabled, you should be good. Also remember, if you go into your network settings here, these are the ones where I had you all go through and set up your connection to localhost. So that means even when you turn on your system in a stock state, it will not be able to connect out to really any servers or services there. Lastly, there's also a payload that we can run for good measure. For this, you can go to the internet browser and bring up the same guide here, which it does so lovingly here. You can scroll down, and we're going to look at the different payloads available. And I'd recommend just giving these some good once-overs and good reads, just so you can see what you have available at your fingertips. But the one that we're going to use here is going to be Update Blocker, or Disable Updates. This is going to disable automatic system software updates. In order to run this, you just have to tap this to run it. The payload's been received. And there we go, disabled updates. So that's disabled our updates for us. Now it disables them on the hard drive or SSD itself, and I'll show you how that works. You can navigate over to PS4 Explorer 2.0, and what it does is it's going to create a couple of dummy files. We can go into root access, navigate down to the update folder, and right here it creates this one, PS4 update.pup and PS4 update.pup.net.temp. And even if we check the properties here, these are fake. You can see this is a 0 kilobyte file, and this one is also a 0 kilobyte file. But this blocks them because as long as these files are right here, you will not be able to update your system, even if you take a USB drive and plug it in and try to manually do it. However, if you ever want to undo that, you can just go back into this update folder and delete these 2 files. And if you ever want to redo this, you just have to rerun that payload that I just showed you all. And with all of those elements in place, you should be in a pretty good spot for not updating your firmware. Either way, that is about it for this video here. Hopefully you all liked it. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Hopefully you all are having some fun with WebKit through WebKitty here, and there is several shoutouts and thanks I'd like to give on this. First of all, of course, is going to be to AraPixel for creating the repository and the website that we've been using for this tutorial. There's several hosts out there, but this one seemed to be a pretty solid one that I wanted to use and showcase here. Additionally, within WebKitty, there's also a lot of credit where credit is due. We can scroll down to the bottom, and in no particular order, just running down, they're giving credits to Anonymous for PS4 firmware kernel dumps, Al-Azif for the modular, PS-free laps and AIO workaround implementations, Phasey61 for the PS-free laps bundle and 6.7 firmware exploit implementations, NT Fargo and UFM42 for the CSS font face userland exploit, which is what brought this up to 11.02, UFM42 for the CSS font face net control and laps implementation, again, which helped bring this up to 11.02, Dr. Yin Yin for intensive multi-firmware testing, Nazki for being the first host I took a peek at, Gato Dev for the WebKitty logo, and finally the respective payload developers, of course for their payloads. I'll also call out and thank Sistro directly, since while we were utilizing GoldHEN for this. Typically with other implementations, I have you all go through the shop and download and set up GoldHEN locally on a USB drive, but since it was already baked into the host, we were able to skip that step. But still, credit where credit is due, a big thank you to Sistro for providing and still maintaining and releasing GoldHEN. Now with all of that said, there's not all too much left here, so I'm just going to wrap up the video. Hopefully this helped out, hopefully you all are enjoying your new systems here, and if you enjoyed this tutorial, if it was able to help out, if you learned something, if you were entertained, a like would absolutely be appreciated. And if you completely hated, you didn't like this tutorial, a dislike is fine as well too. But as I always say, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone.